Well, thank you everyone for bearing with us as we got started. My name is Matthew Lasnoski, and I work at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Asian Art. The picture that you see here is of our Freer building, which was opened in 1923, and this is our central courtyard. So there's not a lot of art here, but it's one of the more peaceful places within our museum that I like to go when I'm able to go in person. My role at the museum is I am the audience engagement analyst. So I take a lot of our visitor data, and I'm the person who helps work with different teams to make sense of the information, help develop strategies, and how to connect to our audiences. Next slide. So in today's presentation, I have four main sections. First, I'd like to just share a little bit about my museum, our priorities and our goals, just to give you a sense of like what we've been focusing on and how we're kind of making sense and tracking progress in our institution. Then I'm going to be going into social media data and analytics a little bit more. And then I'm someone who benefits a lot from case studies. So I wanted to share a new video series that we created since the start of the pandemic to reach out to our visitors, and that has been relatively successful. And then because data is something that helps inform our strategy, I just wanted to go over some next steps that we plan to do in the upcoming months and year based on things that we've learned in the past 8 to 9 months. So next slide. So quickly, this is a slide that just has some basic information about our museum strategic plan. It started last year, was our first year with our new strategic plan, and it is a plan that will go through 2025. The four main goals are listed here, and the ones that I spend the most time thinking about and working on for digital engagement are goals 2 and 3. So goal 2 is to help identify, attract, and serve new audiences, both through physical and digital spaces. So as you can see here in our strategic plan, we're really thinking about prioritizing those digital visitors and are currently actually building a specific digital strategic plan that we'll begin to implement in 2 to 3 months. For goal 3, we as a museum always want to be focusing our content on our objects to help inspire understanding about our communities and cultures and societies of Asia. So that's a really important part of our mission. And a lot of our content really focuses on our objects as the basis for conversation. Next slide. So in the next few slides, what I'll be talking about is how we measure progress across the museum. At our museum, it fits into a lot of people's jobs to think about data, to help us make sense of it. And it's not just me as an analyst who works on it. There's multiple people across the institution, and we have some collaborative models that I wanted to share with you. So next slide. So the first one is we have something called a key performance indicator scorecard. A key performance indicator is some metric that we think is important to track our progress as a museum. The image that you see here is an Excel document with different metrics that we track throughout the year. We use a quarterly system, so every 3 months we pull that specific data point and track it over the course of each quarter during what we call our fiscal year. Our fiscal year is from October to September each year, so it's not completely a calendar year. If you're noticing the dates in there and it's not 100% lining up to the calendar year. For this tool, we have one person in our museum whose job is to collect all the information in this Excel and host a meeting each quarter, so 4 times a year, about the data and information. And it's an opportunity for key people to come and look at this and sort of talk about the progress that's being made, make sense of the data, and see where we might need to focus our energies moving forward. How the data is collected. So different departments are responsible for different parts of this. So not one person, there are probably anywhere between 10 to 15 people that help collect these data points for our director's office. So I'm the representative from our marketing and communications department to collect information about social media followers, visitors to the website, because those are the types of information that we have access to at the museum, that we want to track across all of the departments. This is a really helpful forum as well, because this information gets used at our board meetings. So at our museum, there are 3 board meetings a year. And these people are really important for fundraising and advocating for our museum. And so we use this kind of scorecard to communicate key progress to them so that it's consistent over time. This is our second year using this scorecard of different data. And what we're able to do now that we have benchmarks from the first year is track our progress over time, since we're tracking the same ones year to year. We will be adding new ones and responding to, but one point that I wanted to make is that this isn't the exhaustive list of all the data that we have available. It's just, as the name says, key performance indicators, the ones that are most important for the entire museum to track across departments. But I wanted to go to the next slide to talk about another tool. So Hillary talked about the importance of a content calendar. So I won't go into the specifics of like why it's important, because she addressed that in the last section, which she did a great job at. But what I have here is an example. This is a website called Airtable that we use at the National Museum of Asian Art to plan out our content. So some of the things of the nuts and bolts of this content calendar are that we, just like the museum with that key performance indicator, we measure all of our content from quarter to quarter. So as you can see in the top section, there's little tabs for like quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. As you move out, we don't have as much planned for those later quarters, but as Hillary said earlier, there are certain holidays that we want to mark or celebrate. So we know there's certain topics that we want to fill as we're looking forward, so that when we get ideas or are talking like further out in our planning, we already know some key dates that we already want to mark. The other thing that I wanted to bring out here are the types of things that we put on our content calendar. So this is just a small screenshot, but these over here are really important. So in the column that says content pipeline, it might be hard to see, but it's the first column. That is a description of the content that we're tracking. As you can perhaps see here, we have Zoom backgrounds that we created for people to do. So that's something that we're tracking. Hillary also mentioned holidays being really important. And so one of them that's in here is in China. There's a Mid-Autumn Festival that we wanted to mark and had a really great artwork that showed people celebrating that. So we wanted to make sure to mark that holiday. So there's a variety of content that we're tracking in here. The other thing that's important, because our team, multiple people across the museum are using this document, we have a status on it. So planned means that it's something that we want to do, but it hasn't necessarily gotten to the point where someone has been assigned to it or who is writing it. It's not pictured here, but there's another status, which is assigned. That's when someone has been assigned to write it. There's a deadline for it. Also, we have staging, which means that it's written, perhaps it's been drafted, it might already be scheduled, which is something that Hillary talked about, having that balance between things that just go up and that are scheduled. So when something is perhaps done, but is waiting to be published, and then we mark published whenever something has been published on our calendar. One thing that this tool is really helpful for, in addition to planning out, is it's a really great project management tool. And the status button is one that a lot of different departments are interested in. So it's not just our marketing and communications team that have access to this calendar. We have a representative across many different museum departments who have access. So they can go in, and most of the time, this helps them answer whatever question they have about where something is in the queue. But if there's questions about when a project might be posted, where it's at, and perhaps the calendar isn't up to date, or they have some question that we hadn't quite considered, it is a good way for them to reach out and figure that out. So it's also a really great tool for transparency and making sure that everyone across the museum is on the same page. The last two columns over here um, show us a little bit more about the type of content. So if it's some sort of a digital project promotion, sometimes we have these specialty campaigns that we run over the course of a week. And so we're tracking that. And then whenever something is highlighting our collection or is an online program is another one that we do as well. We also have tabs for exhibitions, but we haven't really been talking about those since our museum closed last March. So that is something that we have in the calendar, but we're not currently activating. The other thing is that we create different types of assets. So some of them are for social media, they're videos, they're perhaps digital content for our newsletter or website. Some of them are publications or programs, and we kind of want to track what type of asset it is. Our team might have this information in mind, but again, this is a tool that we use across the museum and is a way for people to keep track of and see all of these different things who might not be working on the project so closely. There are two columns I wanted to talk about that aren't featured here. One of them is target audience. It's really important for us to think about who we're reaching out to and who we're targeting with the content. And with that, even though it's not featured here, that's a way for us to track who we're targeting to make sure that we're not always speaking to the same audience, that we're working on building out to multiple different types of audiences. And then the other thing that we track that is really important is where we've posted the content. So we might be making something like the jigsaw puzzles, but we're going to post it on Twitter and Facebook, and perhaps on our website in a blog. And so tracking all the places where something goes really helps us be reflective about our strategy and how we move forward. But it also makes sure that we're repurposing content and getting the maximum amount of use out of the work, because it's a lot for us to produce this content, and making sure that we're sharing it in multiple places when that makes sense, and for us to look back. So next slide. The next section that I wanted to talk about was the social media data. So at the start of the museum's closure in March 2020, we did something that a lot of different museums did, which were to ask their audiences what type of content or information that they were interested in. So for our first part, we just asked people to share both on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter what kinds of things that would be useful for them and that they would like to see just in the comments. And we use that information, next slide, and we kind of grouped it into different buckets to see what people were interested in. So the number 19 that's bolded is the whole column for information about artworks and types of art. So what we found from the people who are already following us, which isn't altogether that surprising, that people were really interested in learning more about art objects. In particular, people like animals. They really wanted to see our Japanese art and artists, as well as people had their favorite objects, perhaps that they'd seen before, like textiles or a Buddha, that they were really interested in learning more about. The second category is people really wanted to hear from experts, from our curatorial staff and other people who could talk about the collection. So that was another important one. The other were programs. So people were really interested in finding ways that we could do online programs throughout the course of the pandemic. And one that was asked for in particular was meditation and yoga and online art. So, as Hillary said before, kind of meeting that mood of being welcoming, finding content that met the audience where they're at, that was peaceful, calming, relaxing, that was a bit different than you would see on the news. Um, we have started a meditation program in response to this that has become really successful and uplifting. So that is what we learned. Next slide. So what we did from there was we created a one question survey based on those categories that we were seeing from people. We put that back out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Um, so different platforms we were able to, like Instagram, we could build in a story um, in the platform. However, Facebook doesn't have a poll feature like Twitter or Instagram. So we actually had to send a survey link for Facebook, which is featured here. But the other two, Instagram and Twitter, we were able to just kind of get that information within the platform. Next slide. So, not surprisingly, what we saw across all of these three platforms is that information about artworks were the most popular choice, and it was consistent across all three of our platforms. Um, that category about online talks by experts, by curators, and kind of getting that perspective was also high and consistent across all platforms. And then people are looking for at home or online activities to do. So when I mentioned those jigsaw puzzles earlier, that's been something that we've created for people to do at home. That's a relaxing activity that they can do that isn't just like a designated program time, but something that they can do from home with our different artworks. So next slide. Um, so based on some of the information that we get, that's just a snippet of kind of the way that you can interact with people. Um, we have developed new offerings online. So I just have two pictured here very quickly before I get into the case study about objects we love. The one on the right here, it was a campaign that we did related to the museum from home, where we had curators pick their favorite objects or an object that they've been researching during quarantine. And they kind of gave a quote of something they learned new about the artwork or something that they miss about seeing it in person. So in the content of the post on Instagram, we have a quote directly from the curator along with some information about the image. And those were really well liked, did really well. And we used the museum from home hashtag to kind of put it a part of that home, that campaign that Hillary talked about earlier. I talked a little bit about online programs. So what you'll see at the bottom here is we do a lot of programs that we post on YouTube, but we host through Zoom first. So we have a new series called Tea and Conversation. And the Peacock Room is probably one of our most well-known artworks. And so before the pandemic, we had these on-site talks that we would offer. But as we transitioned online, we thought that we would make it more informal. And also the tea and conversation, all of the presenters are supposed to come with their favorite teas. People are supposed to come to the talk having tea, and it's sort of marketed at a tea time, so that it's more of an informal program that people are encouraged to kind of bring something comforting at home and to learn about an artwork with a group of speakers in the program. Next slide. So one of the things that we've worked on at our museum is creating new videos. The series is called Objects We Love. We've created 11 videos so far since July. We offer them every 2 weeks, and we release them on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram across those 3 different platforms. We don't schedule things all on the same day because we do have slightly different audiences on all of them, but we do use it across multiple platforms. The videos all have different staff members who are sharing their favorite object from the collection that we do online. The videos vary from anywhere from just over 2 minutes to 4 minutes. Um, and how we started in this first season is we started very low tech as we started to learn more about video. So a lot of the presenters used a PowerPoint. It was recorded in Zoom and then edited by someone on our video staff. Um, for instance, the one here, we had one of our curators, Deborah Diamond, um, and she picked one of her favorite artworks there. Some of the metrics that we've used to think about this particular series is in YouTube, you can track the average viewed percentage. So that tells us how long people have watched the video on average. So on average for these videos, for the whole entire series, only about people get through about 47% of the video. So just less than half. So that means that um, people are usually tuning out after 2 minutes or less on our platforms. So keeping those videos short is something that we've been learning from looking at the analytics. The other thing is how many people have seen it. So video views across Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for all of these are for 18,000. So the average is about 2,000 views per video that we've been having so far. Next slide. So the other thing that we do is Hillary said that she engages with people through comments. I also use the comments in a slightly different way, which are to kind of get a sense of people's how they're using the video, how they're interacting with it, because data is both quantitative, but also this qualitative response of the words and people's natural responses are just as useful as like a number or a statistic. So some of these responses here show that people really enjoyed it. They found it educational, that they're adding the video to a syllabus for a class on Indian painting, that people found it really useful and influential as well. So when you're sharing and thinking about the value of these assets and you're advocating either to a funder or a board member on why we should continue to do these, quotes can go a really long way for communicating the value of a video more than a number can. Next slide. So going back to our KPI scorecard, one of the things that our museum and our department tracks for that key performance indicator scorecard is new social media followers. So in this table, we have each platform on social media listed, as well as our annual goal for growth. So in that scorecard, we had last year different percentages of goals to grow across Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Throughout the year, when we did that, we saw that our growth was higher in all of these different platforms, with Facebook being 2 times greater than our goal, Instagram 3 times, and we saw our largest growth in relation to our goal and expectations on Twitter in the last year. I know that a lot of people were interested in hearing about how that happens. I don't have a lot more to add than Hillary because it is about that content calendar, having people interacting with different people, and kind of really capitalizing on moments when you have something to offer that is a part of the people's interest or what they're thinking about currently. Whenever you can kind of tie into what's going on, if you have something relevant, that's when we've really found moments where we've broken through and been able to add in unexpected ways that we weren't anticipating. Next slide. So some of the things that we're thinking about at the museum as we move forward, we're starting to produce a second season of our Objects We Love videos. Some of the things that we focused on is we're refining and standardizing our visual identity for the series. We've come up with a new template for our presenters across the museum. And we're adding like music to it to make it more welcoming as well. The other thing that we've really been focusing on is um, there's a certain number of people who drop off looking at videos in that first 30 seconds. And what we realized is that videos that don't start with hello, my name is, and sort of introducing yourself, but sort of welcomes people in, kind of keeps people interested in the video and keeps them longer. So we've been really focusing on training our staff and messaging the importance of that first 30 seconds in a video, because that's really where we need to hook people in, and they're making that decision if they're interested in tuning in and how long they want to tune in. We will be offering 10 new episodes in the second season of the videos. And we are going to be starting to offer the videos in a second language and have prioritized speakers who speak multiple languages in our next series. Some other things that we've been thinking a lot about in terms of what we've learned from the data and how we're going to focus our energies moving forward is we've created a video library on the museum's website. So we're just trying to draw more attention to social media, because one of the things that we found about our users on the website is that they weren't necessarily hearing about what we're doing on social media. And with YouTube, we've created all of these different playlists, like you saw for Objects We Love, and we're listing them on our website to help generate traffic to the YouTube channel, since our website gets a lot more users as well. The other thing that we are doing is we have these holiday celebrations at the museum. So we have a Lunar New Year that we celebrated for the past 7 years at the museum. And since the museum will still be closed to the public, we're going to be offering a web portal as well as online programs for that as well. So we've been transitioning what has been traditionally an on-site experience to online. And we've kind of used a lot of the experiences that we've learned in these first 9 months to inform that. And we'll also be doing something similar for our annual Nauru celebration in March, where we'll have an online portal as well as online programs for that as well. The other thing that we're thinking about is I mentioned earlier that the Freer opened to the public in 1923. And so now we're 2 years away from our 100th anniversary. So we have a lot of thinking that we're doing right now about building our capacity towards 2023 so that we can use the data and the lessons we've learned in this time to sort of focus on digital and how we can capitalize that in 2023. So a lot of the videos and blogs that we've been creating, we've been thinking of ways to repackage those and share those with our audiences as a way to celebrate and mark our 100th anniversary. And so that's something that we've really been focusing on as well. And that's the end of my slides. I think I'm just ready for questions now.